Hello, listeners. We have discovered something quite astonishing. While combing through our research files, something new presented itself to us. Something tied to the OT and the 3. And for the first time in a long while, we are getting an inside look into the characters and their purpose. But the file was large and encrypted in a way that hindered our ability to fully translate the transmission it captured. So we will only be able to hear part 1 of this episode we are calling The 3. For bonus episodes, please go to Patreon and subscribe to become an interdimensional traveler. The cost is only $2 per month and you will be helping us out tremendously. Now, strap in tight. The trials are about to begin. Lilith, I am here.
You know, I'm getting real tired of your bullshit. All you have to do is admit that you are a greedy monster, and we can move on from all of this. Once that is done, I will post a video for all to see. Yes, you will be outcast from your religion, and a lot of people will hate you, but you will get to live out the rest of your life. So what do you say?
Fuck you, you psychotic bitch.
Well, that just isn't very nice. How about I just zip up that mouth for you then? Wait, do you hear that? Silence. Now, before I begin to work on you, I really need to cement into that pathetic little brain of yours the why of what I am doing here. By this point, you should know exactly who I am. I am the queen of the unknown, the seeker of knowledge, and the debunker of all the bullshit you keep feeding each other. I am Aubrey Rose. You've heard of me, haven't you? No need to speak. I can tell by the fear in your eyes that all the pieces are coming together. Now to the why of me being here. I'm sure you have a general idea, but let's sum it up. Now you see, you are supposed to be a leader of people. Someone who promotes good and justice in the world. Something that I myself can admire, even if your methods of doing so are archaic and based on a book. But you really do not teach what the book says, do you? You drone on and on about how your God can do this and how your God can do that. And you continually spout off about how people will be saved by it. But I do not see your God stepping in right now. I mean, why would he? Not for someone like you. You trick people into believing in a higher power while you line your pockets with their money. Oh, don't try to deny it. I have been coming to your church for a few months now, watching you. And all I see you do is preach a happy little sermon and follow it up with, and that's why we tithe. And at the end of the day, you drive home in a fancy car while others in your congregation struggle to even eat. And you lay that pretty little head of yours on your soft pillow at night without a care in the world. And that disgusts me. You disgust me. And I'm going to free your followers from your greed. Oh, I made you into a neat little ball. I will have to admit, I have never seen someone's head snap back in that way. Oh, and I guess some of your bones made their way through your skin. That has to be painful. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, how can you still be alive? Anyone who was folded up as much as you are should be dead, am I right? Well, I've gotten really good at what I do now. I have had ages to practice, and I will kill you in time. But I feel you need to suffer a lot more before I release you from this plane of existence.
There came a whooshing noise behind Aubrey. She took in a deep, annoyed breath and let it out. Without turning around, she began to speak.
Simon, how nice of you to drop in again. Tell me, what brings you here after so many years? Wait. Before you start spouting off about how in the reality of it all, you've only been gone for a few seconds, just know that I do not care to hear it.
Aubrey was met with silence. She closed her eyes and became even more annoyed.
Ugh, he didn't even come to me himself. He sent Mr. Fields instead.
She turned around quickly with a rage, ready to scream and yell, but she was taken aback. While it was Mr. Fields that was in front of her, it had appeared the man had aged far beyond that of what a human could. He was frail, and his skin hung loose around his appendages. His head hung low, and his back hunched so much that he couldn't stand up straight even if he wanted to. His eyes met hers, and the usual burning intensity that was behind them had faded. He was a shell of his former self. She ran over to him and helped guide his fragile body into a nearby pew.
What have they done to you? Why are you so broken?
He said nothing back. He just stared at her. She couldn't understand why the man didn't speak anymore. She had seen his story. Simon had taken her there to view his reality before he came into his powers. But it just seemed that he had stopped one day. And she didn't know why. Now more than ever, she needed to know what was going on and why he was here. And more than that, where the hell was Simon? Mr. Fields grabbed her gently by the forearm. His eyes pleaded with her, but she didn't know what he needed. Another whooshing sound, and beside them sat Simon. The normal smile that he wore no longer on his face.
You need to heal him, and you need to do it quickly.
How am I supposed to do that? I kill and bring things back to life, Simon. I do not heal.
But you do, and you can. You've been healing those within your reality for years now, and you have been healing yourself. If you can't tell, you haven't aged at all. You are as you were the day you came into your powers. So I now need you to heal him. If Mr. Fields dies, everything we have done will be for naught, and our mission will have failed.
And what fucking mission, Simon? You have been nothing but vague this entire time about what it is we are supposed to be doing, and for what purpose.
Now is not the time to explain things to you. Mr. Fields is dying, and only you can bring him back.
Why can't you do it? Aren't you some all-powerful being?
My power resides within my intellect. I am not able to do what you can do. Now stop wasting time with frivolous questions and heal this man.
Aubrey turned back to the dying man and saw that his pleading look turned to that of a loving resignation. Mr. Fields reached his hand towards her face, to touch her one last time before he left this mortal plane. Pain rocked his body suddenly, and he let out a croaked groan and began to slowly slump over, gripping at his chest. Aubrey shot to her feet in a panic. She knew that death was about to take the man. She looked over to Simon, pleading with him to do something, anything that he could to save him. But all he did was stare back at her with an intensity she had never seen before. Aubrey began to hyperventilate as the idea of losing Mr. Fields set in her mind. This perplexed her. She barely knew him, but she knew there was a connection there that she couldn't live without. Tears fell from her face. She stood there frozen in fear and anguish. Time began to slow as she saw a white glowing light begin to emit from the dying man's chest. It was his essence, the life force that powered him and every living creature within every singular reality. The world around her slowed, and all that could be heard was a dull roar. Her vision tunneled upon his essence, and as if a switch were flipped, the realization of what needed to be done hit her. She waved her hand in the air, and the folded-up pastor came flying across the room to her, his body stopping suddenly as if it had slammed into an invisible wall only half a foot away from her raised hand. Aubrey felt a jolt of electricity flow through every ounce of her being. Her eyes rolled back in her head as her body began to convulse. Blue and black tendrils of light flowed from the pastor and into Aubrey, swelling within her, growing as she sapped more and more of his life from him. A discharge of pure energy hit her like a runaway truck, and she felt her body begin to rise. The essence of this man now resided in her, and as it passed on to her, the shell of what the pastor used to be fell to the floor with a solid thud, unfolding itself to reveal the broken body of a man who was no longer deserving of life. And that life would now be passed on to someone who was more than deserving. To someone who was working to right the wrongs in all the worlds he traveled. And to someone who even now she saw as her friend, even if their time together had been brief. Her eyes refocused, and in one quick movement, she ejected the essence from her and into Mr. Fields. The room fell completely silent. A scream and pulse of energy sent a shockwave throughout the church, pushing the pews back and against the old stone walls and causing the stained glass windows to implode. Mr. Fields' body began to move in sporadic jerks and spasms, his bones cracking and straightening out his arthritic hunch. And youth filled his face once again. His hair, once deathly white and coarse, began to renew to its jet-black sheen. Muscle tissue repaired itself, filling in the once sagging and ashy skin. By the time the essence was fully consumed, Mr. Fields lay there, eyes wide open, chest rising and falling, and once again restored.
Very good, Aubrey. Very good.
Simon placed a hand on her shoulder, and she abruptly pushed it off of her.
What the fuck did you do to him?
It wasn't me that did this to him, and I can explain more to you, but you must come with me. The time has come for you three. It's time to meet Lilith.
Simon began to smile, and Aubrey heard a noise. A child's laughter from above her. She looked up to see a small boy looking down at her from the balcony of the church. He clung to the upper rafters by his hands and feet, with his head bent unnaturally backwards. His hair hung off his head, standing suspended in place. And it was odd, but it seemed like his face changed with every passing second. Aubrey stumbled backwards and fell, striking her tailbone on the hard flooring.
Simon, what the fuck is that?
I would like for you to meet the boy. Like you and Mr. Fields, he holds a special power, one that is unique to the infinite realities that there are, and he will play a key role in the work we are meant to do. Now we must go.
Simon clapped his hands together, and in an instant, all four of them vanished from Aubrey's reality. They flew through the mist, and in the distance they could see an old mahogany door quickly approaching them. Etched into the top was a symbol, one that Aubrey came to know more and more of over the years as she did her work. As they approached, the symbol irradiated and grew brighter. She raised her forearm to her face and shielded her eyes. She glanced over to her right to see Mr. Fields staring at her, his eyes telling her something that she just couldn't quite understand. Their forward momentum stopped, and Aubrey turned to see that the door was mere feet in front of them, shrouded by a mist that probed and searched through the ether around them. She felt a coldness as something brushed her arm. Looking down, she watched as the dark gray substance slowly coiled its way from her wrist to her elbow. Like a snake making its way up a small branch. And for a moment, the mist sat there, almost as if it were taking her in. never tightening or giving her a sense of unease. In fact, she almost felt relaxed at its presence. Her eyes softened and she smiled, wondering if the mist itself was somehow sentient. She had heard Simon speak of it before, but not once did he ever say anything other than the mist being a conduit for all realities. It touched and connected everything, moving through darkness and creating bonds. There came a knock, and Aubrey's thoughts were pulled away.
Lilith, I am here.
The doorknob turned and slowly cracked open. Aubrey's heart began to race. For years now, she has been in her reality, working to change the hearts and minds of people, to bring them to her way of thinking about life, to free them from their fears and obsessions, to bring the good out in all people without the need of an indoctrinating theory. And she was doing it all for this woman here. This woman she was about to meet. Tears began to fill in her eyes as the anticipation and joy built within her. She had so many questions. Why was she chosen? What is their purpose in all of this? And why had she waited so long to show herself to them? The door now fully open, and Aubrey's heart sank. Standing in front of the group was a small man, a scar running down his face and fresh blood coating his black pinstriped suit and blending in with his red bow tie. What looked like a section of human skin fell from his eyebrow and hit the floor below him with a soft splat. A sense of unease fell upon her as he produced a sinister smile, one that was full of deception and the desire for chaos and destruction. With a flourished bow, the man spoke to them.
What a pleasure it is to see you. Friends, family, foes. It is fortuitous, this fruitful finding of you all here. For those not acquainted, my name is Earl. And no need for names from you all. I know you all too well. Aubrey, Mr. Fields, the boy, I guess. Simon, why does it not have a name?
Simon stared at the small man, disgusted at his appearance and enraged that he would enter Lilith's reality in such a manner.
Why are you here, Earl? And better yet, why are you covered in blood?
I've only just arrived. I was making my way to Lilith, and then I heard your knock and your call to her. And why am I covered in blood? Well, the timing of it is just inopportunistic. I was in the middle of feeding.
You are always in the middle of feeding.
That is besides the point. Look, Simon, I know you are not fond of me and what I do, but it is necessary for what we are doing, and by direct order from the woman in charge herself. She needs me to be strong for what is coming, and she could have picked any other version of me. A kinder, meeker Earl. But no, she chose me. And if I'm correct in my thinking, you had a hand in my selection as well.
Well, maybe we were wrong in your selection.
Earl furrowed his brow, staring deep into Simon's eyes. Another chunk of meat sliding down his forehead and stopping at the bridge of his nose. The man seemed unbothered by it, as if it were nothing more than a minor annoyance to be dealt with later.
Regardless, you are stuck with me now, and no other version of me will be suitable for the cause.
Excuse me, but if you two are done stroking your egos, I think we would like to know what the hell the cause is.
Oh my. She is more beautiful in person, and she looks so similar to...
Let's get inside. We have been waiting for this moment long enough. Earl, if you would be so kind, would you lead the way?
The small man nodded at Simon and turned while beckoning for the others to follow. As they entered, there came the noise of the door closing behind them, bathing them in darkness. A large metallic click echoed through the corridor as lights began to shimmer to life. They were in an underground passage of some sort. The walls were lined with stone, a rich brown moss, and decaying vines. The air was stagnant and cold, almost as if they were stuck in a meat locker. The ground below them, was a barren dirt, dry and coarse. Aubrey looked up to see the group moving away from her, and with a light jog, she caught back up to them, placing herself between Simon and Mr. Fields. As they walked, Aubrey noticed one of the vines hanging from the ceiling. It was black at its point of entry, but as it worked its way down, twisting and jutting at sharp right angles, its color changed, transforming from deep colorless black into a vibrant green. And at the tip of the vine was a single blood-red flower. Its center so dark it was like staring into a black hole. She slowed her pace as something like a memory began to creep its way into her mind. She had seen this flower before and even knew it, but it was unlike any species she had ever seen. She felt her stomach go weightless and her eyes glossed over. A feeling of calmness taking over her body and mind. She was entranced by the dullness of the petals, their rich colors seeming to draw in all light. She felt as if she was willing to do anything and everything she could to never leave the spot she was in. To live an entire life right here, and to die in peace knowing that this beautiful flower was the last thing she ever saw.
Aubrey!
Startled by the abrupt call from Simon, she looked away, taking a step backwards, tears beginning to well up in her eyes as a rush of emotions flooded her system. Her mind screamed at her to look back, to stare into the flower.
Aubrey, it is better if we keep moving. And please, keep your sights on me. This place can be deceiving. I will be just ahead of you.
Right. But the flower. Did you see the...
The sounds of skittering could be heard, and Aubrey looked up to see the boy staring down at her, his hands and feet gripping at the ceiling like some fleshy spider. His head hung back, bending his neck far beyond the breaking point, inverting his spine, causing it to protrude outwards and stretch the skin around his throat. And his face was blank. All that was there was the peach skin folded over features that should be there. Aubrey raised her lip up in disgust and anger. The boy cocked his head every which way like an inquisitive dog. But the movements were so unnatural, almost as if he were a new-oiled tin man fighting with everything he had to move. A coldness ran up her spine as she involuntarily shuddered. Simon looked up to the ceiling and let out a soft sigh of annoyance. Why the boy chose to crawl along ceilings like he did was something he couldn't understand. Simon never had, nor wanted children, but he assumed this is how a parent felt when their child did something irritating. So, he just ignored the miscreant and directed his attention back to Aubrey.
Aside from the moss that lines these walls, there hasn't been any growth within this area for centuries. Please, continue on. She awaits us.
Simon turned and began his journey down the hall. The boy snapped his face forward and scurried along the ceiling after him. Another chill ran down Aubrey's spine, and she jumped when she felt a hand touch her shoulder. She turned to see Mr. Fields staring at her, that tortured look in his eyes, burning their way through her physical form and into her essence. She gently shook her head up and down and began to walk. The corridor took a sharp turn to the left, and Aubrey's breath caught in her throat. Before her was a desolate landscape, as if there was a sharp line drawn between the corridor they were in and the destruction before her. The earth was burnt and barren, trees uprooted and charred. The grass that she assumed to be once a vibrant green was now wilted and rich with decay, turning a muddy brown. The sky swirled with gray-green clouds that seemed to bubble and break like the waves of the ocean. Red lightning reaching across them like veins searching for a source to provide life. But there was none to give. The group stepped from the corridor and into this dying reality. The air around them was hot and humid. Each breath taken was a battle. The feeling like being waterboarded by a slowly dripping faucet. A low rumble came from behind them. and Aubrey turned to see that the corridor they were once in was now gone, replaced with an endless landscape of open rolling hills. Upon the horizon, she could see swirling clouds that would fall from the sky, skipping along the ground as a flat stone would when thrown across the water. She had seen tornadoes before, but these were unlike anything she had ever witnessed. Their size and power beyond that of anything she had ever seen on any YouTube video. The swirling vortexes slowed, their debris clouds stuck in mid-swirl. Aubrey moved, but it felt like she was moving through thick clay. Her movements stunted by a power she had never felt before. Her gaze now falling upon Mr. Fields. His eyes that usually penetrated one's soul were now wide. His pupils dilated and glassed over as if in a trance. Aubrey blinks, the movement that once took milliseconds and was generally imperceptible, now taking a lifetime to complete. Her lids raise once again, and in front of her was Earl. Aubrey furrowed her brows at the sight of the small man. Not due to his blood-soaked appearance or even his scarred skin and stature. It was because he was just staring at her, his smile wide and predatory. She felt, if given the chance, he would pounce on her and consume her whole. As if he could read her mind, he winked. The movement slow and deliberate, and that chill once again ran up her spine. She continued her turn towards Simon's voice, his silhouette coming into view. Next to him was the boy, and they stood hand in hand, their bodies shadowed by a blinding prismatic light. She blinked again, trying to clear her vision, and all at once the world sped up. Aubrey feeling the exact moment when time released her from its hold. She took in a deep breath, and her eyes shot open. In front of the group, arms at her side and her silk dress dancing through the wind, stood Lilith. Her long hair burned a deep red and floated as if she were underwater, and her skin seemed to shimmer within the gray of the sky. Without saying a word, she began to speak to them. Her voice, within their minds, strong and motherly.
Welcome. You have no idea how long I have waited to finally meet you. To have all of you here. We have much work to do, and our stories will be forever changed.